Let's jump into the weekly channeled angel message. I'm going to take a moment to be silent as usual. Jump right in, see what the angels have as a message to the collective for this week. So here we go. Okay, this is interesting. The message that they're showing me is Kraft cheese. You know those like fake cheese, well, really processed cheese slices, the American cheddar Kraft cheese. It comes in like the plastic wrap, and they're square. That's what they're showing me, putting it on a burger. So this is really interesting. And it feels like it's really about the fact that it's processed and fake and not authentic. So I'm going to ask like why they're bringing this up, why they want to focus on like a fakeness or not an authentic piece of food and how that relates to us maybe being fake. I don't know. So the reason why they're also showing it to me on a burger with like a bun and all this other stuff is like showing that like all the other ingredients feel really real and rich and authentic and like real food. And then there's just this processed bit and it just like doesn't fit. And like kind of they're showing me like biting into the burger and being like, ooh, the cheese just kind of throws it off. And some of you might like this cheese. Sorry about that. But it just doesn't quite fit. And they're kind of showing me what happens like when we're in a group of people and everyone's kind of being authentic and real and vulnerable. And there's one person that is choosing to not be as vulnerable and kind of showing up in a way that we might label as fake or just wearing a mask, not being as authentic. And they really stand out like a sore thumb and it kind of throws off the group dynamics. There's like a real richness, again, is what they're kind of showing, like with the food, with when we connect to people and we are real and ourselves and vulnerable, there's such a richness there. And it's so good. Like, they're like so good. The burger's so good, but also like that interaction with the people is like emotionally it feels connecting and powerful. And even almost like a spiritual kind of interaction sometimes. But it feels really great when that energy is flowing between people. And they're also saying that could happen within ourselves. Like if we feel like we're mostly showing up as ourselves, but there's like certain bits that we are really, really hiding and we're very aware of that and we're keeping that to ourselves. It just like the energy isn't flowing as great in us. It's like the difference between a burger with real cheese like melted on it and a burger with fake cheese that doesn't quite melt, or like I can't handle dairy, so I have dairy-free cheese and it doesn't melt rarely, and so it just like doesn't fit in with that. And those are such different experiences. So almost like thinking about what parts of you that you feel like you are really keeping secret and aren't authentic about, how much does that stick out like a sore thumb, basically? And how can we integrate that more into who we are so that we feel like we're coming across as a lot more authentic and real overall, like over a lot of different situations, different relationships, spaces, so that we don't feel like we have to kind of mold and shape shift ourselves in different situations. Now, depending on your identities and the world and spaces you're in, you might have to do that to some degree for safety, and that's understandable. We want to be like as much the same, if you will, to varying degrees in different spaces, in public and behind the scenes. The other thing that they're showing me is like walking around with like spikes outside of our body, like don't touch me, and this like very protective kind of thing. And when we're walking around like that, we actually can poke other people, not on purpose, or it's easy for us to get hurt. And this is kind of symbolic to, this comes from this idea that like when we have all these wounds and traumas, that if we're not healing them and kind of actively working on them, it's like having a bunch of needles sticking outside of our body and then trying to go around the world being like, don't touch it. Think about how restrictive our lives would be, because they're sticking out. They're going to easily bump into stuff. People might accidentally bump into it, and how, like, that person didn't realize. Or I might have to maybe I don't want to leave the house because I'm like, it's gonna get triggered and I'm gonna get hurt. So as we're healing and working on stuff, we can take some of these things out, or those pins and needles get smaller so that we have more room to work with. People don't accidentally bump into our triggers as much. I'm trying to see how this relates to the cheese situation, because these feel a little bit separate messages. Okay, kind of the weaving in here is like, as we heal ourselves and more of these wounds we get to take out, and we're not like, oh, I can't go this place, and like don't say that thing to me, and I have to keep to myself because all these things are going to get triggered. We get to relax more, show up as more of authentic self and genuine self, because we're not worried about as much what other people are going to think and what they're going to say. And we're not holding back because when we have a lot of wounds, we might show up in certain ways to protect ourselves. And that might be one of the ways that we wear a mask. So we can show up more as our authentic selves when we have worked on more of our wounds. Let's see if there's anything else with this. It's interesting how they wove those two things together. No, let's see if there's anything they want to leave us with, any things to think about. They really want to, again, tie these two messages together of what wounds, traumas, triggers, experiences that you feel like are just so raw that you are walking around being so protective of them, trying not to be triggered in any way, and not trying to get hurt by anything, so you don't have to experience that wound. What are those wounds? And how do you show up, like behaviorally, relationally, out in the world, by yourself? How do you show up in ways that feels so protective of those parts that it actually leads to harm to yourself, to other people, and just to be aware of that, because that's the first step, is like an awareness. What are those wounds that I'm being so protective of that is actually getting in the way of my life? Those ways I'm trying to protect myself, those behaviors. And then think about, if I were to start to heal and work on those parts, how would that open up my life, is kind of what I'm hearing. How would that expand my energy, myself, my body, my relationships, my world? How would that open things up and change things if I were to start to heal those things and I weren't walking around worrying about someone bumping into my triggers or worrying about being triggered out in the world, that I felt like I could manage it and I could regulate myself and I could be more myself? How would that change your life? So be thinking about those questions, and I hope you're taking care of yourself.